Very significant day for SARS, but I'd like to acknowledge everyone who's present today. Those who are present in the room and those who are present on our multiple online platforms, which include YouTube, Facebook, and X, familiarly known as Twitter. I'd like to also highlight that we have an active hashtag, SARS Revenue, so please look for it, engage with us. Your insights and thoughts are always valuable. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, I'd like to acknowledge the people who are in the room, the leadership as well. I'd like to start with our commissioner, our host, SARS Commissioner, Mr. Gieswetter, co-piloting with his deputy commissioners, as you see them there looking all pretty. And then I'd also like to acknowledge the Honorable Deputy Minister in absentia, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, as well as the South African Reserve Bank Governor, Mr. Lisicha Kganyago, as well as the Office of the Tax Ombud. Pardon, sir? Okay. The Office of the Tax Ombud, represented by Ms. Yang Amputa. The Office of the Tax Ombud CEO, represented by Professor Thabo Lekgwaila. The Executive Secretary of the African Tax Administration Forum, represented by Mr. Logan Watt, as well as the SARS Audit and Risk Committee. SARS leadership, SARS stakeholders, members of the media, South Africa at large, you are welcome, all protocol observed. Ladies and gentlemen, today marks one of the most significant days in the calendar of the finance fraternity, in that the SARS's performance, as well as the revenue estimate for the financial years 2023 and 2024 are outlined. So without further ado, I'd like to usher up my wonderful commissioner, Mr. Gieswetter, to come and give us an overview of SARS's performance against the revenue that's collected for the year under review. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Nompumelelo. Wonderful to one of the descriptions I can attach to my name. Thank you. And since you have kindly welcomed many of our guests by name, I'm going to save time and not repeat that, except to also, again, say it's always special to have the Governor of the Reserve Bank with us in the room. Between the two of us, we're the only organs of state that create real money. The others spend it faster than what we can create it. But also to welcome the captains of industry and leaders of civil society who have taken off their valuable time to join us today. Indeed, we speak to all South Africans who are reliant on the work that we do. And so I wish to personally and warmly welcome all those who are physically with us in the room, as well as those who are connected virtually. I have an apology from a Minister of Finance and the DG of National Treasury who has been called to another engagement at short notice. A special welcome to all our stakeholders who join us here in person today. Every year we decide who we would invite, and today especially we've invited those from civil society on whose work we rely, and also those again from industry who ultimately create the tax revenue that we collect. 30 years ago, to the month, South Africa's first democratic election ushered in an era of hope and healing from past injustices, a milestone celebrated throughout the nation. This period has been one of significant transformation, characterized by many proud achievements, and on honest reflection, still present many challenges for the promise of our Constitution to be fulfilled. The establishment of SARS in 1997 is one of those proud achievements of our democracy. A well-functioning tax administration, and in our case, established in terms of the South African Revenue Act 34 of 1997, as an autonomous agency, has the responsibility for administering an efficient and effective tax and customs system. An efficient and effective SARS provides government the revenue that is the lifeblood of a well-functioning democracy, providing the much-needed resources to fund essential public services like education, healthcare, infrastructure, safety, justice, and security. These services, in many ways, create a level playing field for citizens. It promotes social cohesion and ensures public mobility and safety. A fair tax system fosters a sense of shared responsibility among citizens, strengthening the social contract between government and its people. This sense of shared purpose is crucial for our healthy democracy. Tax administrations serve this higher purpose by enabling government to build a capable state that not only fosters sustainable economic growth and social development, but ultimately serves the well-being of all South Africans. The tax administration has collected 21.5 trillion rand in taxes during the course of our democracy. Tax revenue collections have increased from 114 billion in 1994-5 at a compound annual growth rate of 9.9%, almost 10%, and an average tax to GDP ratio of 22.2%. To put this into perspective, our collections over the last 4 business days this fiscal year amounted to 114 billion, or the total collected in the entire first year of our democracy. So in 4 days, we collected what we collected in an entire year 30 years ago. As I said, I would like again to acknowledge the representatives from Sports for Social Change Network, Southern Africa, Save the Children, South Africa, Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation, Alan and Jill Gray, Philanthropy Africa, National Youth Development Agency, Universities South Africa Forum, Albinism Society of South Africa, the Commission for Gender Equality. These are organizations who do not work for profit and therefore depend on funding in addition to those sources they receive public purse. I would like now to turn to the preliminary revenue collection outcomes for the financial year 2023 to 2024. South Africa's economy is expected to expand at an estimated 4.9% in 23-24 in nominal terms. This represents an upward revision from the 4.3% forecast in the 2023 medium-term budget policy statement in October. Accordingly, in February 2024, revenue was revised upwards by 700 million rand from the October estimate to a new estimate of 1.731 trillion. The International Monetary Fund projects a steady growth in the next 2 years, which may moderately assist South Africa's economic growth prospects. Our economy yet continues to face many challenges. The negative impact of load shedding, as well as the impaired port and logistics operations, continue to constrain growth, as well as development prospects and consequently tax revenues. My colleagues at the OECD, my fellow heads of tax around the world, all report that the recovery of tax debt, the proliferation of tax crime, are growing risks that we face. Whilst technology-driven innovation presents a huge opportunity as we adapt to an evolving and disruptive age of new business models. During tough economic cycles, SARS's administrative efforts becomes even more impactful. Our compliance program, which is a comprehensive program of administrative actions by SARS, goes a long way to underpin the revenue loss due to economic challenges and addresses non-compliance. I now present the preliminary headline results for the past year. For the financial year that ended at midnight 31 March 2024, I am pleased to announce that we have collected gross tax revenue of 2.155 trillion in line with the revised estimate representing a year-on-year growth of 4.2% against a nominal GDP of 4.9%. Net revenue, which is the revenue after refunds have been paid to taxpayers, amounts to 1.741 trillion, which exceeds the revised estimate set by the Minister of Finance by some 10 billion rand, representing a year-on-year growth of 3.2% or 54.2 billion rand more than last year. This revenue performance translates to a tax to GDP ratio of 24.7% and a provisional tax buoyancy ratio of 0.9% at gross level and 0.7% at net revenues. Refunds that we've returned to taxpayer of 414 billion represents a year-on-year growth of 8.6% and is the highest quantum of refunds paid out in our history, up 33 billion from prior year. Just in VAT refunds, the amount of 343 billion represents a growth of 7.5% since the prior year. Noteworthy is that refunds represent about 6% of GDP. It is therefore pleasing that 120 billion of these refunds were directed to SMMEs and 37 billion to individuals. This is good when business and individuals remain cash-strapped. Refunds is often a form of funding during troubled times. Whilst we are pleased that the 414 billion rand returned into the hands of taxpayers is good for the economy, I remain concerned about fraud and abuse of our refund system. In the period under review, SARS was able to prevent the outflow of 101 billion rand of impermissible or fraudulent refunds and secure a number of successful fraud prosecutions. So you can imagine 101 billion rand would not be in the fiscus. It would be in the hand of criminals and fraudsters if we have not built our capability for fraud risk detection. In trade facilitation for the year under review, SARS Customs facilitated a total number of 8.5 million trade transactions amounting to 3.96 trillion rand. Exports amounted to just over 2 trillion rand, whilst imports was 1.937 trillion, resulting in a trade balance surplus of 11 billion rand. Our program for authorized economic operators, which is really designed to give traders a green lane experience should they be accredited and maintain the high levels of compliance, I am pleased to say that this year we added a further 145 new licensees, bringing the total number of AEO licensees to 304. In our compliance environment, an encouraging trend, slow but encouraging, is that we have increased our compliance index, our voluntary compliance index, from 61.6 to 63.9%. This index is we developed in 2020 in support of our strategic intent of voluntary compliance and measures the overall compliance behavior of taxpayers across the compliance value chain of registration, filing, declaration, and payment. It does not yet include taxpayers who ought to be registered but are not. And the work of broadening our tax base, improving the integrity of our register, and improving the overall compliance continues. As far as public confidence are concerned, it is noteworthy that in this regard, public confidence in SARS is improving. So we're collecting more taxes, but what is counterintuitive, because of the professionalism and work demands that we set on ourselves, is that even though we are collecting taxes more efficiently, the survey that we have conducted again shows an increase from 71.8% to 77.5% in this year. And the main contributing themes being operational efficiency, tax morality, tax diligence, and accessibility and trustworthiness of SARS. And we would be the first to say that we need to do a lot more and work a lot harder, earn public trust. But these measures do augur well for improving tax compliance in our environment and support our strategic intent of voluntary compliance. I'd like to share with you now a breakdown of revenue by tax product. We call tax products, the various tax types. I will report the significant tax product contributors that support this positive revenue performance for the year, and for each of the main taxes, I will first report the outcome, then I will share with you the economic, tax policy and base effect factors that have led to this increase, and then for each one share with you the highlights and actions that derive from our compliance program. And so I will use that framework for each of the taxes. Therefore, firstly, for income tax, taxes from individuals, or what we call PIT, which represents 37.4% of total net revenue, gross revenue of 692 billion was collected, which is 53 billion more, or 8.3% than the prior year. In refunds, 40.5 billion refunds was paid out, 3.8 billion more, or 10.3% prior year, leaving a net revenue from personal income taxes of 651 billion, or 49.5 billion, or 8.2% more than prior year. Underlying this result, from the economy, tax policy and base effects, personal income taxes were impacted by slow economic growth and unemployment. Total employment, as per the quarterly employment survey, increased by only 98,000 year on year, mainly from agriculture, finance, agencies, retail trade, wholesale sectors. The wage bill improved from an annual average increase of 6% in the prior year to 6.3% in the year under review, with higher bonus payouts and share incentives mainly from the finance sectors. The PIT register grew by 1.1 million individuals, mainly job seekers or employees below the tax threshold. Only 7,300 individuals contributed a total of 639 additional tax revenue. In addition, 39,900 new employers voluntarily registered for pay-as-you-earn, of which 19,000 contributed 2.7 billion additional taxes, bringing the new revenue under this category from additional registrants to 3.4 billion the year under review. And so you can see how important our base broadening and improving the integrity of our register. From the compliance program interventions in individual taxes, this resulted in a total additional revenue of 54.8 billion in the following way. Through our continued application of third-party data sources and automation, we were able to provide a seamless experience to some 4 million taxpayers who were assessed without having to submit a return. In this process, an additional 2.5 million individual taxpayer returns were processed, in which we detected instances of under-declaration of income, as well as prevented impermissible refunds, adding a combined value of 21.5 billion rand, which would not have been the fiscus had we not executed this work. Those who did submit a return, by the way, would have received their assessment in under 5 seconds, world-class by any standards, and if not selected by our risk engine for further investigation, would have received their refund in under 72 hours. We collected a further 24.7 billion rand in outstanding debt and completed 85 lifestyle and luxury vehicle audits that added 850 million rand. We completed 47 ETI audits totaling 261 million. And we are currently, because this is an area of abuse, We are currently putting a test case, which comes up in May month, at the courts to decide on a matter that involves 398 cases with a value of 2.9 billion. And going to court will set an important precedent and provide certainty and clarity to taxpayers. We collected 190 million, mainly from high wealth taxpayers who underpaid their provisional taxes by invoking what we call paragraph 19.3. And 1.5 billion in revenues was collected from individuals through our voluntary disclosure program. Other compliance interventions totaled 6.1 billion. That moves on to the second tax type, value-added tax, which is 25.7% of our total tax revenue, where we collected gross revenue of 790 billion, or 49.2 billion higher, 6.6% higher than the previous year. Refunds, as you heard, 342 billion, or 23.9 billion, or 7.5% more than the prior year, leaving a net VAT collection of 447 billion, or 25.5 billion more than last year, 6%. From the economic, tax policy and base effects, gross domestic VAT collected for the year under review amounted to 525.7 billion, with a prior year increase of 39.2 billion. Growth in domestic VAT remains robust despite a slowing down in nominal household consumption. Most of the domestic VAT recovery came primarily from finance, manufacturing, and the wholesale sectors. This growth was partially offset by a decline in the mining sector. The year-on-year growth rate of 8% is higher than the average monthly CPI rate of 5.5% for the period April 2023 to February 2024. Higher import VAT amounted to 264.9 billion, representing a growth of 3.9%, or 10 billion higher. This growth resulted from increased demand for capital goods, in amongst others original equipment components, motor vehicles parts, solar energy related equipment, and pneumatic tires. The VAT refund growth this year was 7.5%, moderating from the higher growth of over 20% from each of the previous years respectively. This growth has come from electricity, finance, and mining sectors respectively, this refund growth, from electricity, finance, and mining sectors respectively, due to the increase in exports and investments by mining companies. And furthermore, our declaration data show that there is a growth in refunds due to 15.5% year-on-year growth in claims and 20% growth in input tax cost, consistent with high zero-rated sales and investments in solar-related projects. However, the growth in imported tax cost claims started to reduce, with some of the tax periods showing year-on-year contractions. And as I pointed out, the increasing vigilance of refund fraud risk detection has also brought about a slowdown in the growth of refunds. The tax register grew by 57,700 new vendors, of which 14,200 contributed 4.4 billion in gross revenues in the year under review. From the compliance program interventions in VAT, we collected an additional 116 billion rand. Due to the growing risk of VAT fraud, we have increased our focus on augmenting refund verification with AI-enabled fraud risk detection method tools, and this work has prevented the outflow of impermissible and/or fraudulent refunds, totaling 55.3 billion in VAT, which is up 11 billion compared to last year. In addition, we have collected 39.7 billion of outstanding VAT debt, and interventions targeting syndicated tax and customs crimes have yielded a further 12.7 billion rand. We collected 1.8 billion in revenues from VAT vendors through the voluntary disclosure program, and other compliance interventions added 6.1 billion. And noteworthy is we secured 81 guilty convictions of which 23 in the category of organized fraud, refund fraud, and resulted in 2 custodial sentences totaling 15 years of direct imprisonment. Moving then to corporate income tax, which is 18% of our total net revenue. There we have gross revenue collections of 340 billion, or 26.5 billion less than last year. That's 7.2% contraction. Refunds of 23 billion, which is an increase of 4.3 billion, or 22.8% compared to last year, resulting in a net revenue from CIT of 317 billion, which is 30.8 billion, or 8.9% less than the prior year. Turning to the economy, policy, and base effects that impacted on CIT, we notice that CIT provisional taxes contracted by 35.8%, or 10% down, in the main as a result of a decline in the mining sector, as well as the manufacturing sector, of 41.9 and 5 billion respectively. However, growth has noteworthy taken place in the finance sector with an increase of 5.8 billion, and the electricity sector, largely from renewables, with an increase of 2.2 billion. The CIT from large businesses contracted therefore by 17.5%, while the contribution from small medium enterprises increased by 8.8%. Corporate income tax receipts in the first 9 months was lower due to lower commodity prices, weaker global growth, and the increased incidence of power cuts and logistics constraints. And these have all weighed heavily, especially on the mining sector profitability. The challenging environment was evidenced by gross operating surpluses of companies recording lower annual growth rates, declining from 7.7% in Q1 2023 to 4.3% and 2.4% in Q2 and Q3 respectively. As far as the manufacturing sector, although the APSA Purchasing Managers Index rose by 2.7% by 2.7 points to 50.9 index points in December 2023, it was worsened by a decline in new sales that suffered from a weaker demand for manufactured goods, further driving contraction in CIT collections. The electricity sector, which at the beginning of the investment cycle started to claim a lot more and were not yet operating, we now see a reversal of that, and we're seeing the realization of gains from the renewable industry sector, which has increased CIT collections. Tax register growth, 411,000 companies, of which 1,500 companies contributed 214 million in gross revenues in the year under review. From the compliance program for corporate income tax, we have added a further 61.4 billion rand in the following ways. Our AI-enabled efforts also curbed impermissible refunds and underdeclarations in CIT of 14.5 billion rand. We collected 1.6 billion additional payments, mainly from the SMME taxpayers who underpaid their provisional taxes by invoking the appropriate legislation, as I referred to 19.3, and collected outstanding debt of 16.9 billion from companies. Just in the large business and international segment, through the investigative and audit work, a total of 40 billion in assessments were raised from 341 instances of audit interventions. Noteworthy, of the 40 billion, 36.6 billion came from just 31 base erosion and profit shifting or transfer pricing audits, 5 international audits, and 8 integrated audits. We curbed impermissible refunds and underdeclarations totaling 7.8 billion for large and international taxpayers and collected 17.5 million, mainly from large business and international taxpayers who underpaid their provisional taxes. Thank you. Again, through paragraph 19. We collected 9.6 billion of outstanding debt from large and international taxpayers, and this is included in the overall debt collection that I mentioned earlier. Interventions targeting syndicated tax and customs crimes have yielded 1.8 billion for this segment, and other compliance interventions totals 1.1 billion. As far as customs duties are concerned, our net duties for the year under review is 70.7 billion, or 3.3 billion down, which represents a contraction of 4.5%. The economic, tax policy and base effects that affected this is really the customs duty contraction was largely attributable to the decline in import commodities that attracts higher duties and an associated decline in import flows under a number of significant tariff headings, including motor cars, petroleum oils, oils obtained from bituminous minerals, telephone sets, and selected footwear. From the compliance program in customs, we've done the following work. We completed 230,000 customs compliance inspections compared to the prior year of 235. A total of 8.4 billion in customs-related assessments were raised, leading to the issuance of letters of demand to the respective traders. We collected a total of 2 billion rand in debt and prevented impermissible claims related to VAT export incentive scheme of further 92 million rand, and completed 6,500 custom seizures totaling the value of 6.6 billion rand. In this regard also, interventions that targeted syndicates have yielded 5.5 billion rand of revenue. In summary, therefore, our compliance revenue program have delivered 294 billion rand of additional revenue, which is an increase of 26.7% on prior year and makes up just under 17% of total net revenue. So again, highlighting the importance of building a well-functioning, efficient and effective revenue authority, because these revenues would otherwise be uncollected if we were not able to approach taxpayers, and this would result in over 6 million individual cases that have to be resolved, in over 6.5 million engagements via the phone or across the desk with taxpayers, and ultimately engaging with every single taxpayer who has not fulfilled the obligation. I'd like to share with you, because I take you in my confidence, some general compliance observations. Firstly, I want to talk about practitioners. I want to draw attention to the quality of tax advice from those who should be held to a higher standard of compliance. We have identified 53 tax practitioners who remain non-compliant in their own taxes, which explains in part how they advise their clients and why their clients are equally delinquent. SARS has commenced the process to have their licenses revoked, and to date 8 licenses have already been revoked, while some of them have been identified for further criminal investigation. In one law firm alone, in Square in Sandton, we found 14 partners of this law firm who underestimated their own provisional taxes, and we had to approach using paragraph 19.3 to request top-up payments. Again, people we should be holding to a higher standard. With the increase in illicit financial flows, we've stepped up our vigilance when receiving approval requests for international transfer via practitioners, and many of these have resulted in full-scope audits. The above observations will in future place a lot more focus on firms who promote certain schemes. And taxpayers should take care when they approach taxpayers or tax practitioners. Do your due diligence. The second area is tax-exempt institutions, including NGOs and NPOs. The level of abuse and low compliance in this area remain a huge concern, including being used as vehicles for money laundering and tax crime. Yeah, people create an NPO for money laundering or to commit tax crime. In fact, FATF has highlighted that as one of the objectives we need to resolve if we want to come off the grey listing, specifically the use of NPOs, money laundering. We have taken steps to enhance risk detection and risk mitigation capabilities, and this year, just in this segment, disallowed 1 billion of impermissible claims who was presented to us as donations. Regulatory changes have also been introduced, one dealing with the additional reporting information required on tax-deductible receipts issued by the approved Section 18A organizations and other calling on these organizations to submit third-party data to Sars with effect from May 2024. In the small-medium segment, voluntary compliance index for SMMEs is 66.78%, which is far lower than the large business compliance at 90.83%. So again, a compliance concern for the segment. This low level of compliance is evidenced by the low filing rates as well as under-declaration. This will require a combination of education as well as enforcement in order to ensure that improvements are achieved over time. SARS has set up a specific segment focusing on this area, seeking to work with taxpayers and other government institutions in this regard to improve voluntary compliance. I want to turn to sector contributions. Just for interest, you can see the 5 top sectors being finance, representing 43% of total contribution. The community sector, representing 216 in here, is also government salaries. Manufacturing, representing almost 12% of total tax, and wholesale, 11%, and transport, 4.5% of total taxes. So there you see a breakdown of our gross revenues by these 5 top contributors. To give you a segment view, large business and international make up 490 billion, which is actually a contraction, understandably, year on year. And this segment represents 32% of our total collection. The main sectors being finance, manufacturing, mining, and the register consists of 57,000 active taxpayers. In the small, medium, and micro segment, revenue contribution from this segment is 466.8 billion, or 10.8% growth year on year, and this represents 28% of total collection. The main sectors here being finance, manufacturing, wholesale, retail trade, catering, and this register consists of 3.2 million taxpayers. In traders, which are importers and exporters, revenue contribution from this segment is 508.5 billion, or a 4.1% growth, and consists of 380,000 taxpayers and brings in 20% of total revenue. So that's then a view through the various taxpayer segments. In keeping with our strategic approach, we continue to deepen our segment focus, building our capability in 2 segments specifically, more recently. The one is wealthy individuals, and here revenue contribution from this segment is 12.5 billion, which shows a growth of 10.3% year on year. 4,000 of these taxpayers have already been migrated to the high wealth division, and over time we will expand this base to include a further 58,000 taxpayers and their related entities. The value of high wealth FIAs, these are requests for foreign investment transfers, of 13.6 billion is slightly down from last year's 17 billion, of which 7 billion has already been approved. But here we are also seeing some risk. And a number of large value applications, specifically we've received 2 at 3 billion each, have pended been pended due to the additional risk verification required. And here we are not saying that taxpayers may not manage their affairs, diversify their investments, and protect their interest. We are simply saying do it within the framework of the law. And therefore applicants are encouraged to ensure that their affairs are in order before they make the application, because your application will trigger a risk review. And to avoid unnecessary delay, ensure that your applications are in order ahead of the submitting it. We are also seeing a slight decline in high wealth immigration applications. From tax-exempt institutions, revenue from this segment is 16.5 billion, which is an 8.6% growth year on year, and covers 64,000 entities, mainly PBOs and NPOs. And as stated earlier, we have concerns about the abuse of the segment and will step up our efforts to clarify their obligations, facilitate compliance, but ultimately respond to instances of non-compliance. Let me spend a few minutes, because this is also our 5-year review. I was supposed to retire at the end of this month, some of you will remember. But let me share with you a quick 5-year review. When I assumed my role as Commissioner and Chief Executive of SARS, the Nugent Commission of Inquiry, as well as many other articles and reports, reported the capture of SARS and how the institution had been weakened through a deliberate and corrupt intent by the leaders at the time. Governance and integrity had been eroded, staff morale and hard-won public confidence was lost. We lost more than 3,000 staff, including many critical skills, and many experienced professionals remained in the organization but were marginalized. After an extensive review of the Nugent report and listening personally to our employees during the first few months after taking up the appointment, we formulated a way forward that would address the underlying root causes of decline, restore trust between senior leadership and broad employee base, and create an inspirational path for the future of SARS. We set for ourselves the following must-win battles. We need to broaden the tax base so that more people pay less tax instead of fewer people paying more tax. That is an explicit objective of ours. To improve voluntary compliance and fiscal citizenship, because we truly believe that most taxpayers are honest, and if we help them, they will fulfill their obligations. We are working at a time of austerity, so we need to leverage our resources to achieve more with less. And increasingly, you see our operating model is evolving into a more people, data, and technology-driven model. Increasingly, the work of our people will be augmented by insights from data and applying artificial intelligence to improve the outcomes of the work we do. As I said, we need to restore trust within the organization, maintain crucial partnerships with government and other stakeholders, because we are not an island, we're part of an ecosystem, and we have to build an organization with integrity that can be trusted and admired. People may not like paying taxes, but they must trust that we will do our work without fear, favor, or prejudice, and we will strive to be professional and competent at all times. We can set no lower standard for ourselves. We work with trust money, and we must earn that trust. The achievement of our strategic intent of voluntary compliance, as underpinned by our 9 strategic objectives, remain our overarching commitment as we seek to fulfill our mandate to collect taxes, improve compliance, and facilitate legitimate trade. There's a slide that shows our 9 objectives, which is also published on our website, but just to refresh your memory, those are the ones. Our commitment to the vision of a smart, modern SARS with unquestionable integrity is bearing fruit. We do this in an increasingly complex environment, tough economic challenges, and a proliferation of tax and customs crime, as well as significant budgetary constraints. Notwithstanding the strategic initiatives on which we embarked have progressed consistently, reinforcing our commitment to the direction and sustainability of rebuilding SARS. After 5 years, we cannot declare victory. We still have much work to do. We have, however, made significant progress as borne out by measurable results. We measure everything. We set clear objectives and we measure everything. So every number that I have shared with you today has either been audited or independently surveyed. So we don't mark our own scorecard. Allow me to share some of these with you. As hard measures, gross revenue grew by a compound annual growth rate of 6.5% over the 5 years, whilst refunds that we disbursed grew by 7.53%. Net revenue during this period grew by a compound annual growth rate of 6.2%. Compliance revenue grew by a really noteworthy 23% year on year. Trade facilitation in this period grew by 9.5%, and tax buoyancy over this period remains positive over 1, and this year will probably end up at about 0.9%. Soft measures. Public trust in 2018-2019 was 48%. That has improved to 75.3% this year. And the attitude of taxpayers towards compliance increased from 66% to 77.5%. Employee engagement has improved from 61% to 69% in a post-COVID world where engagement has declined. And we have received a clean audit report from the Auditor General in the audit that was completed in the last financial year. And so what is really encouraging is we're achieving the hard measures we set for ourselves, but also ensuring that the integrity of the organization is also maintained. There's a couple of slides that just shows that. That's the revenue trend slides. The following slide will show you our voluntary compliance index and the positive trend, followed by another slide which shows you the compliance revenue trend over the period, starting at 128 in 2019, delivering this year 293.7. Then there's a trade volume slide that we shared with you, also showing an increase with a slight moderation towards the outer years. The next slide is the opinion survey that is independently done, showing you the 48% to 75% increase in public trust, which is important for us. If the public does not trust us, then they feel morally justified to fiddle with their taxes. And the improvement in the attitude towards compliance is equally a testament of the improvement in the quality of engagement between SARS and its public. And then, in a post-COVID world, as I said, in the world, in Africa and in South Africa, employee engagement was down. In our case, our employee engagement went up to just under 70% with a 69% participation rate, which is significantly high. SARS in this period was also ranked number 1 by young professionals, and in the last independent survey, the Reserve Bank just beat us to the top spot as the most preferred employer. So we're working on that, Governor. We came second to the Reserve Bank, a worthy second. Then turning to the next topic that I want to share with you quickly, which is the whole of government approach. And yeah, I'm being a bit of an activist, I'm being a bit of a stirrer, because I'm talking to my colleagues in government as well. Let me first share with you progress on FATF, which is important for us, businesses and government, because this means we will either stay on the grey list or we'll come off the grey list. But the Financial Action Task Force was very clear. If South Africa cannot demonstrate successful convictions in matters such as complex tax evasion, money laundering, and terror financing, we will not come off the grey list. Our work is cut out for us. In this regard, we've not delivered enough. The national financial system has to be strengthened by addressing shortcomings in areas such as registering of beneficial owners of legal entities and personas so that people can't hide behind the veil. The seizure of the proceeds of crime is important, and the prevention of terror financing, and specifically the role of NPOs in money laundering. Since 2019, I have to say that the relationship between SARS and the law enforcement agencies have significantly improved. We share data within the framework of the law that permits us to share data, and this is to support criminal investigations and state capture-related prosecutions, collaboration between the investigators of the investigative directorate and the ID prosecutors are healthy. In fact, what we did a few years ago, we had the space in this building and we asked Shamila Petroy to move the ID here so they are right next to us so the teams can work together when they need to. The DPCI, NPA and SARS have launched the initiative to align our standard operating procedures, support a more efficient and effective investigations and prosecutions. The FIC reports have become more usable. But notwithstanding all of this progress, we have to do more. We can and we must do better. Our work with and through the law enforcement agencies has to step up as a whole of government if we are to tackle the scourge which is eroding not only economic value but also social cohesion. As seen in a typical complex organized corrupt case that is currently underway, it involves money laundering and tax evasion. Fingers point to corrupt public officials as well as professional enablers. We are dependent on our sister agencies such as the Hawks and the NPA to bring this matter to court and to ensure the successful prosecution of all involved. Ultimately, we want to see more successful prosecutions with custodial sentences. People must wear orange overalls. But unless we achieve a whole of government approach amongst the law enforcement agencies and the rest of government, and measuring the right things, we will not succeed in lifting grey listing and avoid future grey listing. More importantly, we will not deal crime and corruption the death blow it requires. SARS will support solutions that effectively strengthen the investigative and prosecutorial capability and establish dedicated capacity for SARS. Several legacy projects, if implemented, will anchor and sustain the whole of government approach and generate information that can be translated into evidence for, amongst others, criminal investigations and prosecutions. These projects that we believe are legacy whole of government projects are implementing a unique digital identity for all South African citizens and entities, as many other developed countries have already done. So this is not trying to split the atom or land someone on the moon. It's very doable. Ensuring data integrity by capturing data once through a common portal with necessary segregation based on the mandate of the respective agencies. Introducing a common payment platform with e-invoicing. Establishing a common disbursement platform to replace the disparate payment platforms that are currently characterized by inefficiency and corruption. There are no good reasons why we shouldn't, as a whole of government, do these things. And SARS, subject to funding and appropriate support, we are ready to lead these initiatives since they are integral to our own success. We also are exploring projects with the Reserve Bank in terms of strengthening the financial sector. Then, looking forward, whilst we have made great progress towards implementing our strategic intent and vision, we've lost some time due to COVID, and the next 2 to 5 years, we will continue to build on the gains, compelled by the imperative to modernize our systems to be better, more efficient, more effective, and also bearing in mind that we need to address key legacy enabling projects. So we will make a stronger business case, at least for SARS, to advance the project to establish a unique digital identity, to create a single tax account for every taxpayer and trader, embedding entity compliance modeling into how we risk profile taxpayers and the selection of cases for further investigation and audits, the replacement of our existing case management platform to improve taxpayer and trader experiences, as well as enabling performance management of our own employees with hybrid and virtual work arrangements being an inevitable reality, and advancing the project to upgrade our ports of entry. These projects form the basis for tax administration, or what is known Tax 3.0, which is tax administration in a technology-enabled, AI-driven platform of the future. But they are also ideal projects for a whole-of-government approach, and we would encourage that it be leveraged as such. To conclude, I want to express our gratitude to over 62 million people. People often tell me only 5 million people pay tax. I remind you that we have 62 million people who pay tax. Every time you buy something, you are paying tax via the VAT system. 28 million registered individuals and trusts, 4 million companies, 680,000 employers, 380,000 traders, including authorized economic operators, and 12,500 hardworking SARS employees. Working with and through the many intermediaries, we will work to achieve the outcome we present to you today, including stepping up our efforts to work with other government agencies, registered clearing agents, registered controlling bodies, and tax practitioners, with associations and industry bodies. We are really, really mindful of the fact that we are not on our own, we are part of a broader ecosystem. We are fortunate to have the support from stakeholders across the local, continental, and international fiscal ecosystem. The important work is the intersection of the economic performance, which SARS can do little to influence, but to ensure that we're a catalyst to a more efficient and effective economy. And therefore we do that through our tax administration and our compliance work, which underscores our strategic intent of voluntary compliance. We will do this consistently, as far as we can, correctly, and own up when we don't. In conclusion, therefore, I express my appreciation to several important stakeholders. I want to thank the President, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana, Deputy Minister David Masondo for their unwavering support and ongoing assistance to rebuild SARS, along with the Director General of Treasury, Duncan Peterson, and the colleagues of National Treasury, as well as the work we do with the South African Reserve Bank under the leadership of Governor Lesetja Kganyago. I want to thank all stakeholders, related bodies across all sectors, our colleagues across government departments and agencies as well. The support of family is always deeply appreciated, so I want to convey also my admiration not only to the 12,500 SARS employees, but also to their families, who continually and diligently support us as we pursue our higher purpose, and that ultimately gives an expression of public confidence in the work we do. We acknowledge the dedication that has contributed immensely to the organization's progress over the past years. I want to thank you sincerely for your compliance and honesty as taxpayers and traders that have enabled these outcomes. SARS appreciates you. Your tax matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for that wonderful painting of SARS's performance against the estimated revenue. I think we also appreciate the articulation of the building blocks that culminate in the revenue that's collected, as well as the hindrances and the wonderful mitigating factors that we will put in place to ensure that the economy gets out of the grey, as he calls it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to make an announcement, particularly for those who are joining us or who have just joined us on the online platforms, to say we have an active hashtag that we'd like for you to please engage and join us on. Sars revenue is the hashtag, so please do give us your insights and comments. It will be highly appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, are you okay? I know tax is serious business, but a smile wouldn't hurt. There we go, there we go. We're going to proceed to the next section of our briefing. Okay, we're going to proceed to the next section of our briefing, which is the question and answer session by the members of the media. We're going to quickly outline the rules. Oh, as well as those that will be coming from the public through our interactive hashtags, as well as the SARS mailbox. So we do welcome any questions from those platforms, but we'll proceed with the ones that are in the house for now, from the media personnel. How we're going to do, or our rules of engagement, is we're going to have a mic that's going to be centered here, and you'll be taking questions in batches of 3. And what we'd like is for the journalist to please raise their hand to be recognized, and then they proceed to the mic stand. When you get to the mic stand, you will introduce yourself as well as the media house that you represent. Ask your question, and then I will ask the panelists to.
I'd like to also invite a member of the non-media, since the media has had a session with us earlier and will see us later.
Okay. Just to reiterate, the Commissioner is saying the question and answer session is extended to anybody who's in the audience and not limited to the media personnel who have already had a prior engagement to our leadership. So, ladies and gentlemen, if we can get the mic poised in the correct space, and then we'll start taking questions. Please get ready to just get yourself in front of the mic.
All you have to do is to give your name and tax.
At the moment, I'm not sure. Are there any questions from the floor? And I know that we have people in the background who will be managing the questions from the other mailboxes. So if there are any there, we'll also welcome them. Going once? It looks like, Commissioner, a lot of people were satisfied with the sessions that you've had prior to the briefing. Maybe we should give it a minute or two. All right, ladies and gentlemen, maybe just to check with my nothing from the mailbox. We're good to go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that officially brings us to the end of our media briefing. And, very efficient, yes. I really appreciate your cooperation, and please safe travels and goodbye. Ladies and gentlemen, good day once again, and I'd like to welcome you to the Revenue Media Briefing.